Lots of other issues making headlines today, including the City of Sydney's climate emergency declaration. So let's get into all of it right now with New South Wales State Political Editor at the Australian newspaper, Andrew Clennell. Great to have you on the show, Andrew. I'll get to our dear friend Clover Moore in just a moment. Take me through this issue. It pertains to the Sharoof children. We'll remember those children holding up severed heads a number of years ago. I remember it, obviously I was working in government, so I remember it so well from the other side. But take us through what's happened overnight. We've now got reports that 8 children have been removed, evacuated from a Syrian refugee camp. Where are they and how soon will they be back in Australia?
Well, they're in coalition-controlled Iraq. Aid workers went in and got them. I think they were the subject of an ABC Australian story or whatever it was a short time ago. The grandmother's trying to get them back. Children, including one of the children, 17, her children as well. So they'll be put through all sorts of psychological assessments, DNA assessments to establish their Australian citizenship, we're reporting, and then they'll be allowed back in the country. The grandmother will be bringing them back. So one can only assume careful monitoring of them, or, you know, the suggestion is that the state government and others will have to be working to make sure they're completely de-radicalised after what they've been through. So, it's interesting, while Morrison was condemning the parents, the Prime Minister was condemning the parents today, he was sort of reflecting on what he thought was a sad circumstance with the children being brought back.
Yeah, let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said.
It is sensitive, it is delicate. I think Australians would agree that we need to show compassion in the cases of these children, but at the same time, Australians would equally expect the government to exercise all the care that is needed to ensure the security issues are well addressed in the decisions that we've made. And that's what we've done.
Yeah, look, it's a vexed question. I mean, I know some of them, these children were actually born overseas. They were born in Syria, born in Iraq. They are young. In the case of the 17-year-old daughter of Sharoof, this will be her 3rd child. So you can only just imagine the sort of depravity that she has been witness to, and she's basically an adult at 17. How do you think Australians are going to feel? Is there sympathy, Andrew, for these children, or is there sympathy as long as these kids aren't in a class with anyone we might know?
Yeah, well, you probably just summed it up, didn't you? I think I don't see a lot of sympathy, in the general populace for the circumstance of these children. But the fact that they are mere children and quite young at that, some of them, will mean that I think most people think it's okay for them to come back as long as they're sort of monitored. I mean, we even had a situation with, which is nowhere near on this scale and issue, a situation with asylum seekers where people in Australia weren't happy with the asylum seekers coming, but they didn't want to see children in detention. So I think there's a different view about children's situation than adults who make their own choices. But, I think there'll be some fear attached to their return, and I don't expect all Australians to support their return.
All right, the other issue, I'm going to get into the whole climate conference in Bonn in Germany with your colleague Graham Lloyd from the Oz, who writes about this very well and very often. But interesting, Clover Moore, someone who really hates to jump on a bandwagon, seems to be jumping on a climate change bandwagon at the moment. This whole debate about climate emergencies, there's a tweet up there, this is happening around the world. The nomenclature, the language, the jargon of climate change is being asked to be ramped up. We all know it was global warming at one stage, then it was extreme weather, and now it's a climate emergency. And places like the Guardian media outlets all have to change their scripts. Where's this going to go, mate? It's just, I think she's very much out of step with the community. We saw that at the last election.
Well, I don't think it'll go anywhere. And, local councils are supposed to be about rates and rubbish, and she's been about bike paths and the light rail here, which isn't the most popular project, which Gladys Berejiklian jumped on board. Now she's on about climate change. I mean, stick to your knitting. Barry O'Farrell kicked her out of the state parliament. He said it wasn't right that you could be a mayor and also a member of parliament. She was upset about that, Clover Moore, but she ran again and she won again. And really her retirement, because of the nature of the city of Sydney, the area it covers, and some of, I guess, the lefty inner city areas that it covers, seems to be in her hands. She'll go when she retires, her future, but generally amongst broader Sydney and broader New South Wales, I think the majority of people would say, you know, the council should be worried about the city, not about going outside, you know, into federal boundaries.
Yeah, look, just federally, Parliament comes back next week. There's a debate inside the Labor Party of whether or not they'll support the tax package that the government took to the election. I mean, people can be critical about mandates, but there wasn't a hell of a lot that the government actually campaigned on, and very much campaigned on tax cuts. Labor are squibbing whether or not they'll accept the package in full. Sensible people like Joel Fitzgibbon, who got quite a beating in his seat of Hunter, coal territory in New South Wales in Hunter, he's been mugged by the reality, and he's gone out there publicly and said, look, the people voted for this. We've got to back it in. We've been kicked in the backside, and we need to acknowledge that. Yet there's some in the Labor Party who think that they can deny the tax cuts, and there'll be a fight about it, we're told, in the Parliament next week. Do you think they'll eventually capitulate?
Well, that is a good question. I hope for their sake they do, Peter. I mean, Albanese, you know, he was part of a team which insisted that the Senate pass the franking credits and the negative gearing reform. That was a mandate, but this apparently isn't a mandate. I mean, the guy's joking. He's actually suggesting bring forward tax cuts. He's trying to dictate policy, even though they lost the election to Frydenberg and Matthias Cormann. He's saying bring forward the tax cuts for those between 90 and 120 or 130. But, you know, frankly, it's none of his business. The thing was passed. I mean, in terms of the mandate, you know, the election was won, and he should just let it go through. They should just cop it sweet, Labor. They shouldn't fiddle at the edges. I have to say that it's a bit of a joke that we're talking about some of these tax cuts of phase 3 or whatever that come into effect in 2024. I always thought that was a joke. And I think it's a bit cute to say, oh, you get tax cuts in 5 years so we can keep our surpluses. I mean, do one or the other. I'd like to see the whole lot of tax cuts next week, frankly. But at the same time, why is Labor making itself the story yet again? You know, I mean, they just don't seem to get it. And they're so divided over issues like this. That's why you end up with this sort of hodgepodge approach to the issue when it should be, OK, we'll just wave them through. We'll accept the umpire's decision, the umpire in this case being the Australian people.
Yeah, can't get a better umpire than that. Andrew Clennell, thanks very much for your time.
Cheers.